Life has a funny way of pulling the rug out from under you when you least expect it. 1 minute, you are living the American dream, beautiful wife, 2 kids, white picket fence and all. The next, your whole world comes crashing down around you, leaving nothing but the bitter taste of betrayal in your mouth and a hollow ache in your chest where your heart used to be. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the moment when I first noticed the cracks in my perfect little life. Because as they say, hindsight is 20/20, and looking back now, I can see all the warning signs I missed. The late nights at work, the hushed phone conversations, the sudden obsession with her appearance. Classic red flags, right? But love, as they also say, is blind, and boy was I blind. My name S. John, by the way. John Thompson. Just your average Joe trying to make it in this crazy world. I work in IT, nothing fancy, but it pays the bills and keeps a roof over our heads. My wife, Megan. Well, she used to be the light of my life. Emphasis on used to be, but we'll get to that. It all started on a Tuesday. Isn't it funny how you always remember the exact day your life went to shit? It was raining, I remember that much. The kind of rain that soaks you to the bone and chills you from the inside out. I'd just gotten home from work later than usual thanks to a system crash at the office. The house was quiet when I walked in, which was unusual. Normally it'd be chaos, kids yelling, TV blaring, Megan chattering away on the phone. But not that night. I found her in the kitchen staring out the window with this look on her face, like she was a million miles away. When she turned to me, there was something in her eyes I'd never seen before. A coldness, a distance. It sent a shiver down my spine. "You're late," she said, her voice flat. I shrugged off my wet coat, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. "Yeah, sorry about that. We had a major meltdown at work." "Where are the kids?" "At my Mom S," she replied, turning back to the window. "I needed some space." Space. That word hung in the air between us, heavy and ominous. In that moment, I knew something was terribly, irrevocably wrong, but like the fool I was, I ignored it, pushed it down, buried it deep, because that is what we do, right? We ignore the things that scare us, pretend everything is fine even when we can feel it all falling apart. The next few weeks were tense. Megan was distant, irritable. She'd snap at me for the smallest things, then apologize profusely, her eyes brimming with tears. It was like living with a stranger wearing my wife S face. The kids noticed too. Jimmy, our 10-year-old, asked me one night why Mommy was always so mad. I didn't have an answer for him. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday. We were supposed to have dinner with our best friends, Mike and Sarah. We'd known them for years, since college. Mike was my buddy, my confidant. Sarah was like a sister to Megan. We did everything together, vacations, weekend barbecues, you name it. But that night, Megan begged off, claiming a headache. "You go," she said, avoiding my eyes. "I'll just stay home and rest. I should be stayed, should be insisted on taking care of her." But I didn't tea. I went to dinner, leaving her alone in that big, empty house. Mike was off that night, agitated. He kept checking his phone, barely participating in the conversation. Sarah seemed oblivious, chattering away about her new yoga class. But I noticed, and a seed of suspicion began to take root in my mind. When I got home, the house was dark. Megan was already in bed, or so I thought, but as I passed by the bathroom, I heard it. A muffled sob, the kind of gut-wrenching cry that comes from the depths of your soul. I stood there, frozen, my hand on the doorknob. Part of me wanted to burst in, to comfort her, to fix whatever was wrong. But another part was terrified of what I might find. In the end, cowardice won out. I went to bed pretending I hadn't heard a thing. But sleep eluded me that night, my mind racing with possibilities, each one worse than the last. The next morning, Megan was different, cheerful, too cheerful, like she was trying too hard to act normal. She made pancakes, something she hadn't done in months. As I watched her flutter around the kitchen, humming to herself, that knot in my stomach tightened. "I'm thinking of getting a new phone," she said casually over breakfast. "This one is acting up." I nodded, not really paying attention. But later, as I was cleaning up, I noticed her old phone on the counter. She must have forgotten it in her haste to take the kids to soccer practice. I stared at it for a long moment, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew it was wrong, knew I should respect her privacy, but that nagging voice in the back of my mind wouldn't shut up. With shaking hands, I picked up the phone. It wasn't T-locked. Megan had never been big on security. As I scrolled through her messages, my world began to crumble. There they were, in black and white. Hundreds of messages between her and Mike. Intimate, loving messages, plans for secret rendezvous, declarations of undying love. My legs gave out from under me and I sank to the kitchen floor, the phone clutched in my trembling hands. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes, but I couldn't stop reading. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, horrifying but impossible to look away from. They'd been sleeping together for months, sneaking around behind my back, behind Sarah S. back. All those late nights at work, all those sudden errands, it had all been lies. I don't know how long I sat there, lost in a haze of pain and betrayal. The sound of the front door opening snapped me back to reality. Hastily, I put the phone back where I found it and wiped my face. Megan breezed into the kitchen, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Hey, honey, did you—" She stopped short when she saw my face. "John, what's wrong?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at her, this woman I thought I knew better than anyone in the world, this woman who had become a stranger. "How long?" I finally managed to choke out. She blinked, confusion clouding her features. "What? How long have you been fucking Mike?" The color drained from her face. For a split second, I saw panic in her eyes. Then, like a switch had been flipped, her expression hardened. "You went through my phone?" she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. I laughed bitterly. "That's what you were worried about? Your privacy? Not the fact that you've been cheating on me with my best friend?" She crossed her arms, her jaw set in a defiant line. "You wouldn't understand. Try me," I spat. And then, like a dam bursting, it all came pouring out. How she felt trapped, suffocated by our life. How Mike made her feel alive, desired. How she tried to fight it, but the attraction was too strong. As I listened to her justify her betrayal, something inside me broke. The Megan I knew, the Megan I loved, would never have done this. Would never have hurt me like this. This woman standing before me, cold and unrepentant, was a stranger. "I want a divorce," I said quietly, cutting off her stream of excuses. She stared at me, shock written all over her face. Clearly, she hadn't expected this. Maybe she thought I'd forgive her, that we'd work it out. Fat chance. "John, please," she said, her voice softening. "Think about the kids. We can fix this." I shook my head. "There's nothing to fix, Megan. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." As I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there with her mouth hanging open, I felt numb. Like I was watching someone else's life fall apart, not my own. I locked myself in our bedroom, my bedroom now, and pulled out my phone. With shaking fingers, I dialed a number I knew by heart. "Hey, buddy," Mike's cheerful voice came through the speaker. "What's up?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. The rage, the hurt, the betrayal, it all welled up inside me, threatening to choke me. "John?" Mike's voice took on a note of concern. "You there?" "I know," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a long pause. Then, "Know what?" "Don't play dumb, Mike," I growled. "I know about you and Megan. It is over. All of it." Another pause, longer this time. When Mike spoke again, his voice was different, harder, angrier. "You don't know shit, John," he snarled. "You have no idea what's really going on." Before I could respond, he hung up. I stared at the phone in disbelief. What the hell did that mean? Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would test my sanity, my strength, and everything I thought I knew about the people I loved. As I sat there on the edge of the bed, my world in pieces around me, I had no idea how much worse things were about to get. No idea of the web of lies and deceit I was about to uncover. No idea that by the end of it all, I'd be questioning everything and everyone, including myself. But that is the thing about life-altering moments. You never see them coming until it's too late. And by then, all you can do is hold on tight and pray you make it through the storm. The next few days passed in a blur of pain and confusion. Megan moved into the guest room, her silence more deafening than any words could have been. The kids, bless their innocent hearts, knew something was wrong but didn't understand the magnitude of it. How could they? How do you explain to a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old that their mother had betrayed their father in the worst possible way? I threw myself into work, desperate for any distraction from the hell my life had become. But even there, I couldn't escape. Mike worked in the same building, just a few floors up. Every time I stepped into the elevator, my heart would race, wondering if this would be the moment I'd come face to face with the man who destroyed my life. It was on one of these elevator rides that I ran into Sarah. The moment she saw me, her face lit up with that warm, friendly smile I'd known for years, but as she took in my haggard appearance, the smile faltered. "John, are you okay? You look rough." I opened my mouth to lie, to say I was fine, just tired. But something in her concerned gaze broke me. Before I knew it, I was spilling everything. Right there in the elevator, surrounded by strangers, I told Sarah about Megan and Mike's affair. The color drained from her face as I spoke. When the elevator doors opened on her floor, she grabbed my arm and pulled me out with her. She led me to an empty conference room and shut the door behind us. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A few days," I replied. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I didn't know how to tell you." She nodded, her eyes distant. I suspected, but I didn't want to believe it. My jaw dropped. "You knew?" Sarah's laugh was bitter, hollow. "Knew? No. But I'm not blind, John. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. I guess I didn't want to face it." We sat there in silence for a long moment. Two broken people united in their pain. Then Sarah reached out and took my hand. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice small and vulnerable. I squeezed her hand, finding a strange comfort in her touch. "I don't know, but we'll figure it out. Together." Looking back now, I realize that was the moment everything changed. The moment Sarah and I went from being friends to something more. Something born out of shared pain and betrayal, but no less real for it. Over the next few weeks, Sarah became my lifeline. We'd meet for coffee, for lunch, sometimes just to sit in silence and try to make sense of the chaos our lives had become. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, those meetings started to take on a different tone. It started with lingering touches, eyes meeting and holding for just a beat too long. Then came the late-night phone calls, whispered conversations that stretched into the early hours of the morning. Before I knew it, I was looking forward to seeing Sarah more than I dreaded facing Megan. But even as this new, whatever it was, with Sarah was blossoming, the situation at home was deteriorating rapidly. Megan had gone from cold and distant to downright hostile. She'd pick fights over the smallest things, screaming at me in front of the kids, accusing me of turning them against her. One night, after a particularly nasty argument, I found myself sitting on the back porch, a bottle of whiskey my only company. The cool night air did little to soothe the fire of anger and hurt burning in my chest. That S when I heard it. A muffled giggle, followed by the low rumble of a man's voice, coming from the side of the house. My blood ran cold. No, she wouldn't tea. Not here. Not in our home. But as I crept around the corner, my worst fears were confirmed. There, in the shadows, were Megan and Mike, wrapped in each other's arms, oblivious to the world around them, oblivious to the fact that their children were sleeping just yards away. Something in me snapped. With a roar of rage, I charged at them. Mike saw me coming and pushed Megan behind him, his face twisted in a snarl. "You son of a bitch!" I yelled, swinging wildly. My fist connected with his jaw, sending him stumbling backward. Mike recovered quickly, his eyes blazing with fury. "You want to do this, John? Fine, let's do this." What followed was a blur of fists and pain. We rolled around on the ground, trading blows, years of pent-up anger and betrayal fueling our fight. I could hear Megan screaming at us to stop, but her voice seemed distant, unimportant. I don't know how long we fought, but eventually, exhausted and bloodied, we both collapsed onto the grass. As we lay there, gasping for breath, I turned my head to look at Mike. Really look at him. Gone was the easygoing, charming guy I'd called my best friend for years. In his place was a stranger, his face twisted with a hatred I'd never seen before. "Why?" I managed to choke out. "Why her? Why us?" Mike's laugh was cold, devoid of any warmth. "Why not? You had it all, John. The perfect wife, the perfect kids, the perfect fucking life. And what did I have? A dead-end job and a wife who couldn't even give me a child." I stared at him, stunned. "Is that what this is about? You were jealous?" Jealous? He spat. No, John, I am not jealous. I am taking what should have been mine. Before I could respond, a shrill scream cut through the night air. We both turned to see Lily, our 8-year-old daughter, standing on the back porch. Her eyes were wide with terror as she took in the scene before her, her father and uncle, bloodied and bruised, sprawled on the lawn. "Daddy?" she whimpered, her voice small and scared. In that moment, all the fight drained out of me. What the hell were we doing, fighting like animals while our children watched? I struggled to my feet, ignoring the pain that shot through my body. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Everything's okay. Go back inside with Mommy." Megan, who had been frozen in shock, snapped into action. She rushed to Lily, wrapping her in her arms and ushering her back into the house. As they disappeared inside, she turned back to give Mike and me one last look. The disgust in her eyes was palpable. Mike got to his feet, swaying slightly. "This isn't over," he growled. I watched him stumble away, feeling nothing but a bone-deep weariness. He was right. This was far from over. The next morning, I woke to find Megan S.'s side of the bed empty. A note on her pillow told me she'd taken the kids to her mother S. for a few days. "To give us all some space," she wrote. But I knew the truth. She was running away. From me, from the mess she'd made, from the consequences of her actions. I called in sick to work and spent the day in a daze, alternating between bouts of intense anger and crushing despair. By the time evening rolled around, I was a wreck. That S when Sarah called. "I heard what happened," she said, her voice soft with concern. "Are you okay?" I laughed bitterly. "Okay? No, Sarah. I'm about as far from okay as it is possible to be." There was a pause, then, "I am coming over." Before I could protest, she hung up. 30 minutes later, she was at my door, a bottle of wine in one hand and a first aid kit in the other. As she cleaned the cuts on my face, her touch gentle and soothing, I found myself telling her everything. The fight with Mike, his cruel words, Lily S.'s terrified face. By the time I finished, tears were streaming down my face. Sarah set aside the first aid kit and pulled me into her arms. "Oh, John," she murmured, running her fingers through my hair. "I am so sorry. You don't deserve any of this. I don't know who moved first." One moment we were hugging, the next our lips met in a desperate, hungry kiss. It was wrong, I knew that. We were both hurting, both vulnerable. But in that moment, I didn't care. I needed to feel something, anything, other than the pain that had been my constant companion for weeks. We fell back onto the couch, hands roaming, clothes being discarded. It was frantic, almost angry. A physical manifestation of all the hurt and betrayal we endured. Afterward, as we lay tangled together on the couch, reality came crashing back. What had we done? Sarah must have sensed my sudden tension. She sat up, pulling the throw blanket around her. "John, Don T," I said, cutting her off. "Please, Don T, say you are sorry. I can T. I can handle that right now." She nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and something else. Something that looked dangerously like hope. "What do we do now?" she asked softly. I shook my head at a loss. "I don't know, Sarah. I honestly don't know." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Megan. "We need to talk. Coming home tomorrow. Alone." I showed Sarah the message, watching as her face fell. "I should go," she said, already reaching for her clothes. I wanted to stop her, to ask her to stay, but I knew I couldn't this. Whatever it was between us, it couldn't continue. Not like this. Not while we were both still married, still reeling from our spouse's betrayal. After Sarah left, I sat in the dark living room for hours, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I cheated on my wife, the same thing I'd been so angry at her for doing. What kind of hypocrite did that make me? But even as guilt gnawed at me, I couldn't bring myself to regret it entirely. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than pain and anger, and that scared me more than anything. As dawn broke, casting a pale light through the windows, I made a decision. No more running, no more hiding. It was time to face this head on, to fight for what I wanted. And what I wanted, I realized with startling clarity, was a fresh start. A life free from the lies and betrayal that had poisoned my marriage. When Megan walked through the door later that day, her face set in lines of grim determination, I was ready. Ready to end this chapter of my life and begin a new one. Little did I know, Megan had plans of her own. Plans that would turn my world upside down once again and test the limits of my sanity. Megan swept into the house like a storm front, her eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and something else I couldn't quite place. Determination, desperation, whatever it was, it sent a chill down my spine. "We need to talk," she said, her voice clipped and cold. I nodded, gesturing towards the kitchen. "After you." As we sat across from each other at the kitchen table, I was struck by how foreign she looked to me now. This woman, who I'd shared a bed with for over a decade, who'd given birth to our children, suddenly seemed like a stranger. Her face was a mask, unreadable and distant. "I am pregnant," she blurted out, her words hitting me like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world tilted on its axis, everything I thought I knew crumbling around me. "What?" I finally managed to choke out. Megan's laugh was bitter, devoid of any joy. "You heard me, John. I'm pregnant. And before you ask, yes, it is Mike S." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to anchor myself to something solid. How? How long have you known?" "A few weeks," she admitted, her eyes dropping to the table. I wasn't sure what to do." 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Anger, betrayal, disbelief. And underneath it all, a deep, aching sadness for what could have been. For the family we once were. "What do you want?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Megan looked up, her eyes meeting mine. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Vulnerable, uncertain. But then the mask slipped back into place. "I want a divorce," she said firmly, "and I want full custody of the kids." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Full custody, Megan? You can't be serious. They are my children, too." Her eyes hardened. "Are they? Can you honestly say you've been a father to them these past few weeks? While you've been off God knows where, probably screwing that bitch Sarah, I've been the one taking care of them, comforting them, trying to explain why Daddy's so angry all the time." I flinched at her words, guilt washing over me. She wasn't entirely wrong. I had been absent, too caught up in my own pain to see how it was affecting Jimmy and Lily. But then her words fully registered. "Wait, how do you know about Sarah?" A cruel smile twisted Megan's lips. "Oh, John, did you really think you could keep that a secret? This town has eyes everywhere. I know all about your little consolation prize." I felt the blood drain from my face. If Megan knew, did that mean Mike knew too? The thought sent a jolt of fear through me. Mike's words from that night echoed in my head. "This isn't over." "Megan," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I know I've made mistakes, we both have. But taking the kids away, that is not the answer. They need both of us." She scoffed. "They need stability, John. A home where they are not constantly walking on eggshells, wondering when the next explosion is going to happen. Can you honestly tell me you can provide that?" I opened my mouth to argue, but the words died in my throat. Could I? With everything that had happened, with all the anger and hurt still churning inside me, could I really give Jimmy and Lily the stable home they deserved? Megan must have seen the doubt in my eyes. Her expression softened slightly. "Look, I'm not trying to be cruel, but us, it's over. Has been for a long time, if we are being honest. This baby, it's a chance for a fresh start for all of us." "With Mike," I said flatly. She nodded, not even having the decency to look ashamed. "With Mike, he wants to be a father, John. To this baby, to Jimmy and Lily. He can give them the kind of life we always talked about but never quite managed to achieve." I laughed bitterly. "And you think I am just going to step aside? Let another man raise my children? I think you're going to do what is best for them," Megan said, her voice taking on an edge of steel. "Because if you don't, if you fight me on this, I'll make sure everyone knows about your little indiscretion with Sarah. How do you think that L looked to a judge, John? A father who abandoned his family to shack up with his best friend's wife?" The threat hung in the air between us, heavy and oppressive. I stared at Megan, barely recognizing the woman in front of me. Where was the kind, loving mother of my children? The woman who stood by my side through thick and thin? Had she ever really existed? Or had it all been a lie? "You are blackmailing me," I said, my voice flat with disbelief. Megan shrugged, a cold smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I prefer to think of it as motivation to do the right thing. I felt something inside me break. The last shred of love, of hope that I'd been clinging to evaporated. In its place, a cold, hard resolve took root. "Get out," I said quietly. Megan blinked, clearly not expecting this reaction. "What?" I said. "Get out," I repeated, my voice growing stronger. "You want a war, Megan? Fine. You've got one, but I'm not rolling over and letting you take my kids without a fight. So go. Go to Mike. Go to your lawyer. Do whatever the hell you want. But know this, I will fight you every step of the way. And I will win." For a moment, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, but then it was gone, replaced by that cold, hard look I was coming to know all too well. "You'll regret this, John," she said as she stood up. "I'll make sure of it." As the front door slammed behind her, I sagged in my chair, the full weight of what had just happened crashing down on me. ID just declared war on the mother of my children, the woman ID once vowed to love and cherish till death do us part. How had it come to this? My phone buzzed, jolting me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Sarah. "Are you okay? Haven T heard from you. Worried." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the reply button. What could I say? That my wife was pregnant with my ex-best friend S. baby? That she was trying to take my kids away? That I had just thrown down the gauntlet in what was sure to be a nasty, drawn-out divorce? In the end, I typed out a simple response. No, but I will be. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, mediators, and tense, stilted conversations with Megan about the kids. I threw myself into work, desperate for any distraction from the hell my personal life had become. But even there, I couldn't escape. Mike had quit his job, leaving without so much as a goodbye, but his presence lingered like a ghost in the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room, in the pitying looks from coworkers who had heard the gossip. Sarah and I. Well, that was complicated. After that night, we both agreed to take a step back, to focus on our respective divorces and on healing. But the connection between us remained, a low, constant hum of possibility. We meet for coffee. Ostensibly to discuss our legal strategies, Sarah was fighting Mike for every penny, determined not to let him walk away with half of everything she'd worked for. But inevitably, our conversations would drift to more personal territory. I found myself opening up to her in ways I never had with anyone before, not even Megan. It was during one of these coffee meetings that Sarah dropped another bombshell. "I am pregnant," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I froze, my coffee cup halfway to my mouth. "What?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I just found out it's Mike S, but I don't think he knows." The world tilted again, that now familiar feeling of the ground shifting beneath my feet. "Sarah, are you sure?" She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I'm sure. And I don't know what to do, John. I always wanted a baby, but not like this, not with him." I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "Whatever you decide, I am here for you. You know that, right?" Sarah squeezed my hand, a watery smile crossing her face. "I do. And that S part of why this is so hard, because I think I am falling in love with you, John." The words hung in the air between us, charged with possibility and fear. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jimmy Dad. "When are you coming home? Mom is acting weird and I am scared." Reality came crashing back. My kids needed me. I couldn't get lost in whatever this was with Sarah, no matter how tempting it might be. "I have to go," I said, standing up abruptly. "The kids, they need me." Sarah nodded, understanding and disappointment warring in her eyes. "Of course, go, we'll talk later." As I drove home, my mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Sarah was pregnant, with Mike S. baby, and she was falling in love with me. It was like some twisted soap opera, except it was my life. Our lives. When I pulled up to the house, I knew immediately that something was wrong. Megan's car was in the driveway, but all the lights were off. It was barely past sunset, the kids should still be up. A sense of dread settled in my stomach as I approached the front door. It was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, calling out, "Megan? Kids? Is everyone okay?" Silence greeted me. I moved through the house, flipping on lights as I went. The living room was a mess, cushions strewn about, a lamp knocked over. In the kitchen, a half-prepared meal sat on the counter as if abandoned mid-cook. Fear gripped me as I took the stairs 2 at a time, racing towards the kids' rooms. "Jimmy! Lily!" I shouted, no longer caring if I woke them up. I just needed to know they were safe. Their rooms were empty, beds still made, no sign of a struggle, but no sign of my children either. I was about to run back downstairs when I noticed a piece of paper on Jimmy S.'s desk. With shaking hands, I picked it up and read, "John, I warned you what would happen if you fought me. You should have listened. By the time you read this, the kids and I will be long gone. Donna tried to find us. You'll never see them again. Goodbye, Megan." The paper slipped from my numb fingers as the full horror of the situation hit me. Megan had taken my children. She disappeared with them, leaving no trace behind. I sank to the floor, my back against the wall, as a primal scream of anguish tore from my throat. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The life I'd known, the family I'd loved, was gone. And in its place, a void, a vast, echoing emptiness that threatened to swallow me whole. But as I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of my shattered life, a spark of determination flickered to life within me. I would find them. No matter how long it took, no matter what I had to do, I would bring my children home. The war Megan wanted, she was about to get it. And God help anyone who stood in my way. The next few hours passed in a blur of frantic phone calls and barely contained panic. I called the police, filed a missing persons report, and reached out to every friend and family member I could think of. But as the night wore on, a sickening realization settled in my gut. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment decision. Megan had planned this, meticulously and ruthlessly. The police were sympathetic, but frustratingly unhelpful. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson," the detective assigned to the case said, his voice tinged with a mixture of pity and resignation. "But without evidence of immediate danger to the children, we can issue an Amber Alert. As far as the law is concerned, this is a custody dispute, not a kidnapping." I wanted to scream, to grab him by the shoulders and shake him until he understood. This wasn't just a custody dispute. This was my life, my children being ripped away from me. But I knew it wouldn't do any good, so I nodded, thanked him for his time, and retreated to the empty shell of my home. As dawn broke, casting an eerie, pale light through the windows, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. I'd been up all night, calling and texting Megan nonstop, begging, threatening, pleading for her to bring the kids back. But my messages went unanswered, calls sent straight to voicemail. That S when I noticed the blinking light on the answering machine. With trembling fingers, I pressed play, holding my breath as Megan S.'s voice filled the room. "John, I know you're probably going out of your mind right now. Good. Maybe now you understand how I felt, watching you throw away our family for that whore, Sarah. The kids are safe. They are with me where they belong. Don't bother trying to find us. By the time you hear this, we'll be long gone. Goodbye, John. I hope it was worth it." The message ended with a click, leaving me in stunned silence. The anger, the bitterness in her voice. It was like listening to a stranger. Where was the woman I'd married? The mother of my children? Had she ever really existed, or had it all been a lie? As I sat there replaying the message over and over, searching for any clue, any hint of where they might have gone, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "John? Are you okay? I've been trying to reach you all night." I let out a bitter laugh. Okay? I was about as far from okay as it was possible to be. But as I opened my mouth to tell her to leave me alone, to let me wallow in my misery, a thought struck me. Sarah. She knew Mike better than anyone. If Megan had run off with him, maybe Sarah would have some idea where they'd go. "Sarah," I said, my voice hoarse from a night of fruitless shouting, "I need your help. Megan S. taken the kids. She S. gone." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Oh, John, I'm so sorry. What can I do?" "Come over," I said, surprising myself with the desperation in my voice. "Please, I can be alone right now." 20 minutes later, Sarah was at my door, her face etched with concern. As soon as I saw her, something inside me broke. I collapsed into her arms, sobs racking my body as the full weight of what had happened crashed over me. Sarah held me, her fingers running through my hair as she murmured soothing words. We stood like that for what felt like hours, clinging to each other in the doorway of my empty home. Finally, when my tears had subsided and I could breathe again, Sarah gently led me to the couch. "Tell me everything," she said, her voice soft but firm. So I did. I told her about the fight with Megan, about the note, about the message on the answering machine. As I spoke, I watched Sarah's face, saw the play of emotions across her features, shock, anger, and then something else, a look of grim determination. "We'll find them, John," she said when I finished, her hand squeezing mine. "I promise you, we'll bring your kids home." I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to believe her. But the cold, hard reality of the situation was setting in. "How?" I asked, my voice hollow. "The police want to help. I have no idea where they've gone. It's like they've vanished into thin air." Sarah was quiet for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. Then slowly she said, "I might know someone who can help, but it's not exactly legal." I sat up straighter, a flicker of hope igniting in my chest. "I don't care. Whatever it takes, Sarah. I'll do anything to get my kids back." She nodded, pulling out her phone. "Give me a minute." As Sarah stepped outside to make her call, I found myself pacing the living room, my mind racing. Who was this mysterious contact of Sarah S.? What kind of help could they offer that the police couldn't? And more importantly, could I trust them? But then I thought of Jimmy and Lily, of their faces, scared and confused, being dragged away by a mother they barely recognized anymore. And I knew I'd do whatever it took, deal with whatever devil I had to bring them home. Sarah came back in, her face grim but determined. "He'll help," she said, "but it's going to cost us. A lot." "How much?" I asked, already mentally cataloging everything I owned that I could sell. Sarah shook her head. "It's not just about money, John. This guy, he operates in a world where favors are currency. If we do this, we all owe him." "Big time." I didn't hesitate. "I don't care." "Whatever it takes." Sarah nodded, a small, sad smile crossing her face. "I thought you'd say that." "Okay. He'll meet us tonight. 9 o'clock at the old warehouse down by the docks." The rest of the day passed in a haze of anxiety and anticipation. I tried to sleep, knowing I'd need to be alert for whatever was coming, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jimmy and Lily's faces, heard their voices calling out for me. By the time 9 o'clock rolled around, I was a bundle of raw nerves. Sarah drove, her face set in lines of grim determination. As we pulled up to the warehouse, a chill ran down my spine. The place looked abandoned, windows dark and broken, graffiti covering the walls. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. Sarah's hand found mine in the darkness. "No," she admitted, "but it is our best shot." We got out of the car, the gravel crunching under our feet as we approached the building. As we neared the entrance, a figure emerged from the shadows. He was tall, with close-cropped hair and the kind of build that spoke of military training. "Sarah," he said, his voice a low rumble. "It's been a while." Sarah nodded tightly. "Thanks for meeting us, Jack." Jack's eyes slid to me, assessing. "This the guy?" "Yeah. John, this is Jack. Jack John." I stepped forward, extending my hand. "Thank you for Jack," cut me off with a sharp gesture. "Save it. I'm not here for thanks. I am here because Sarah called in a favor. Now tell me what you need." Swallowing hard, I launched into the story. As I spoke, Jack's face remained impassive, but I saw something flicker in his eyes when I mentioned the kids. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, "All right, I'll help. But understand this, once we start, there's no going back. You sure you are ready for that?" I thought of Jimmy and Lily, of the emptiness in my house, of the ache in my chest that hadn't eased since I'd found that note. "I'm sure," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Jack nodded. "Okay, here's what we're going to do." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Jack, it turned out, had connections everywhere. He accessed phone records, credit card statements, even traffic camera footage. Slowly but surely, we began to piece together Megan and Mike's movements. They headed west, stopping at a series of motels along the way. But then, 3 days in, the trail went cold. It was like they vanished into thin air. I was ready to give up hope when Jack called with a breakthrough. "I think I found them," he said, his voice tight with excitement. A woman matching Megan S. description checked into a motel in Arizona yesterday. She was with a man and 2 kids. My heart leapt into my throat. Are you sure it S them? As sure as I can be without seeing them myself. But John, there's something else. The man she S with? It's not Mike. The world tilted on its axis. What? Who is it then? I don't know, Jack admitted, but whoever he is bad news. I ran his face through some databases. He has got a record. Assault, armed robbery. This guy is dangerous, John. A cold fear gripped me. My kids were with this man? This criminal? What the hell was Megan thinking? We need to go, I said, already reaching for my keys. Now! Whoa, slow down, Jack said. We can just go charging in there. We need a plan. He was right, of course. But the thought of my children in danger, so close yet so far, was driving me mad. We spent the next few hours planning, strategizing. Jack called in more favors, arranging for surveillance on the motel. By the time we were ready to move, it was well past midnight. The drive to Arizona was tense, filled with a mixture of hope and terror. Sarah sat beside me, her hand in mine, offering silent support. In the back seat, Jack pored over maps and made phone calls, his voice a low, constant murmur. As we pulled into the motel parking lot, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. The place was run down, the kind of establishment that didn't ask questions as long as you paid cash. There, Jack said, pointing to a room on the 2nd floor. That S where they are. I started to get out of the car, but Jack's hand on my arm stopped me. Wait, he said. We do this smart or we don't do it at all. For the next hour, we watched and waited. Jack's contact on the inside had confirmed that Megan, the man, and the kids were all in the room, but we needed the perfect moment to strike. Finally, as the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon, we saw movement. The door to the room opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, muscular, with tattoos covering his arms. This must be the guy Jack had warned us about. As he headed towards the vending machines, Jack nodded. Now, he said, this is our chance. We moved quickly, our feet silent on the cracked concrete. As we reached the door, I hesitated for just a moment. What if we were wrong? What if this wasn't them? But then I heard it, a small, familiar voice from inside the room. Mommy, when are we going home? Lily, my little girl. Without another thought, I kicked the door in. The scene that greeted us was chaos. Megan, sitting on the bed, let out a scream. Jimmy and Lily, huddled in the corner, looked up with wide, frightened eyes. Daddy, Jimmy said, his voice small and uncertain. And then, everything happened at once. Megan lunged for the kids. Jack moved to intercept her, and I froze. For just a moment, I stood there, overwhelmed by the sight of my children after so long. That moment of hesitation nearly cost me everything, because suddenly the man was back, and he had a gun. Who the fuck are you? He snarled, waving the weapon between Jack and me. Time seemed to slow down. I saw Jack tensing, ready to spring into action. I saw Sarah just outside the door, her face a mask of terror. I saw Megan, her arms around the kids, her eyes wild with fear and anger. And I saw my children, my beautiful, innocent children, caught in the middle of this nightmare. In that moment, I knew that whatever happened next would change everything, that the choices we made in the next few seconds would ripple out, affecting all of our lives in ways we couldn't even begin to imagine. As the man's finger tightened on the trigger, I made my choice. I stepped forward, putting myself between the gun and my family. I am their father, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, and I am taking them home. Time seemed to stand still as I stared down the barrel of the gun. The man's finger twitched on the trigger, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and anger. In that moment, I was acutely aware of every sound, every smell, every tiny detail of the room. The harsh fluorescent light flickering overhead, the musty smell of old carpets and cheap cleaning products. The soft whimper of my children behind me. You ain't taking nobody nowhere, the man growled, his voice low and dangerous. Now back the fuck up before I put a hole in you. I raised my hands slowly, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. Look, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I don't want any trouble, I just want my kids. Let them go and we'll leave. No one has to get hurt. The man laughed, a harsh, grating sound that sent chills down my spine. You think it is that easy? You think you can just waltz in here and take what is mine? They are not yours, I spat, anger momentarily overriding my fear. They are my children, and I'm not leaving without them. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jack shifting his weight, ready to spring into action. I prayed he wouldn't do anything rash. One wrong move, and this whole situation could explode. Megan chose that moment to speak up, her voice shrill with panic. "John, please, just go! You don't understand! We can go back! He'll kill us!" I turned to look at her, really look at her for the first time since entering the room. She was pale, her eyes sunken and ringed with dark circles. She looked haunted, broken, nothing like the strong, vibrant woman I married all those years ago. "What are you talking about, Megan?" I asked, confusion momentarily overriding my anger. "Who will kill you?" "Mike," she whispered, her eyes darting nervously to the man with the gun. He found out about the baby, about it not being his. He went crazy, John, said he'd kill us all if we didn't disappear." The pieces started to fall into place. The sudden departure, the mysterious man, Megan's desperate actions. It all made a twisted sort of sense. "Is this true?" I asked the man, not taking my eyes off Megan. He shrugged, a cruel smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Maybe, maybe not. Dawn to really matter now, does it? 'Cause you ain't leaving here with those kids." I was about to respond when a small voice piped up from behind me. "Daddy?" I turned to see Lily, my sweet little girl, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Are we going home now?" Something inside me snapped. All the fear, all the anger, all the pain of the past few months crystallized into a single burning determination. I was getting my children out of here, no matter what. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, my voice soft but firm. "We are going home." What happened next was a blur of motion and sound. Jack lunged at the man with the gun, tackling him to the ground. The gun went off, the sound deafeningly loud in the small room. Megan screamed. Sarah, who had been waiting outside, rushed in and grabbed the kids, pulling them towards the door. I moved without thinking, throwing myself into the fray. The man was strong, but Jack and I together were stronger. We wrestled the gun away from him, pinning him to the ground. "John!" Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "We need to go! Now!" I looked up to see her standing in the doorway, Jimmy and Lily clinging to her legs. Megan was nowhere to be seen. "Go!" Jack yelled, still struggling with the man. "I've got this! Get the kids out of here!" I hesitated for a split second, torn between helping Jack and getting my children to safety. But one look at their terrified faces made the decision for me. "Thank you," I said to Jack, my voice thick with emotion. "For everything." He just nodded, a grim smile on his face. "Go." And Don T looked back. We ran, down the stairs, across the parking lot to the car. I could hear sirens in the distance, growing closer. Someone must have called the police when they heard the gunshot. As we peeled out of the parking lot, I caught a glimpse of Megan in the rearview mirror. She was standing in the doorway of the motel room watching us drive away. For a moment, our eyes met. I saw a flicker of something. Regret? Relief? I couldn't tell. And then she was gone, disappearing back into the room as we turned the corner. The drive home was long and tense. Jimmy and Lily, exhausted from their ordeal, fell asleep in the back seat. Sarah sat beside me, her hand on my arm, a steady, comforting presence. "What now?" she asked softly, as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. I shook my head, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settling onto my shoulders. "I don't know," I admitted, "but we'll figure it out, together." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of police statements, custody hearings, and long nights spent comforting my children through their nightmares. Megan was arrested, along with her mysterious companion. Mike, it turned out, had skipped town as soon as he found out about the pregnancy. No one had seen or heard from him since. The story came out in bits and pieces. How Mike had threatened Megan when he found out the baby wasn't his. How she'd panicked and run, convinced he would make good on his threats. How she'd met the man at the motel, a small-time criminal named Ray, who had promised to help her disappear for a price. It was a mess, a tangled web of lies, betrayal, and desperation. And caught in the middle of it all were my children, their innocence shattered by the actions of the adults they trusted most. The custody battle was brutal. Megan's lawyers tried to paint me as an unstable, potentially violent father. They brought up my fight with Mike, my affair with Sarah. But in the end, the truth won out. The judge took one look at the police reports, at the testimonies of the children, and awarded me full custody. As for Sarah, well, that was complicated. The baby turned out to be Mike S. after all. She decided to keep it, a decision I supported wholeheartedly. We took things slow, both of us still reeling from the wreckage of our former lives. But as the months passed, we grew closer. She became a rock for me and the kids, a steady presence in our chaotic lives. It wasn't easy. There were days when the weight of everything that had happened threatened to crush me. Days when I'd look at Jimmy and Lily and see the shadows of fear and uncertainty in their eyes. Days when I'd wake up in a cold sweat, haunted by nightmares of what could have been. But slowly, surely, we began to heal. We went to therapy, all of us. We talked about what had happened, about our fears and our hopes for the future. We cried together, laughed together, learned to be a family again, and through it all, Sarah was there. Patient, understanding, loving. She never pushed, never demanded more than I could give. She simply was, a constant in our lives, a source of strength and comfort. It was a year to the day after that fateful night at the motel when I finally worked up the courage to ask her to marry me. We were in the backyard watching Jimmy and Lily play with Sarah's baby girl, Emma. The sight of them together, laughing and carefree, filled my heart with a joy I thought I'd never feel again. I turned to Sarah, this amazing woman who had stood by me through the darkest period of my life, and I knew with absolute certainty that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. "Sarah," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "will you marry me?" She looked at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears, and nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." As we kissed, the sounds of our children's laughter filling the air around us, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We had been through hell, all of us. We had faced betrayal, fear, and loss. But we had come out the other side stronger, together. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew that. There would still be challenges to face, hurdles to overcome. Jimmy and Lily would always carry the scars of what they'd been through. Sarah and I would have our own demons to battle, but as I looked at my family, my beautiful, imperfect, resilient family, I knew we could face whatever came our way, because we had each other, because we had love. And in the end, isn't that what really matters? As the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the yard, I pulled Sarah close. Jimmy and Lily ran over, Emma toddling behind them on chubby legs. We stood there, the five of us, wrapped in each other's arms. A family, broken, mended, and stronger for it. In that moment, I sent up a silent prayer of thanks, for second chances, for new beginnings, for the love that had seen us through the darkest of times and brought us into the light. And as I looked at the faces of the people I loved most in this world, I made a promise. To myself, to them, to whatever higher power might be listening. I promised to cherish every moment, to never take this precious gift for granted, to love fiercely, forgive freely, and live fully. Because life, I had learned, was too short for anything less. As we headed inside, the kids chattering excitedly about dinner plans and weekend activities, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was ours to shape, and I intended to make it a beautiful one. "Come on, Dad," Jimmy called from the doorway. "You promised we could have pizza tonight." I laughed. A full, hearty laugh that came from deep in my soul. "Coming, buddy," I called back. "I'm right behind you." And I was. Right behind them, right beside them, right where I belonged. Home, safe, loved. The end of one chapter and the beginning of a new one. A better one. As I closed the door behind us, shutting out the fading light of day, I couldn't help but smile. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, we would face them together, as a family. And really, what more could anyone ask for?